Yeah, thanks for coming. Great to have you here on board. Maybe we do a very, very short introduction sequence. Yeah, everybody just saying who himself or herself is, please.
Hey everybody, my name is Chris Noring. I work for Digital McKinsey, full stack developer. I will be talking about React today, I believe, and RxJS tomorrow. Google developer expert, just like Manfred over here.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, I'm Manfred Steyer. I'm a trainer and consultant for Angular, and I'm helping companies to get started and to use Angular.
Hi, I'm Lorna. I'm a developer advocate for IBM. I've been a PHP developer for many years, and I'm now working with all of the web scripting languages, so I'm coming to JavaScript almost as an outsider. So this is going to be an interesting week.
Hi, I'm Shmuela. I'm an independent front-end developer and consultant and trainer focusing on Angular. And I'm also the founder of NG Girls. Just a note about that, we need more mentors in Freiburg next week. So if you're there, please talk to me.
Cool, thank you. So first of all, I'd like to discuss a little bit with you. So what's going on? So imagine you're a music lover and you have your favorite band and almost nobody loves it and you are proud of, I know it, and then the mainstream is coming, yeah, and this changes the game. So do we have a similar situation now with JavaScript? So now the mainstream, as we say, in people from the Microsoft world, from the Java world, etc., now coming and embracing JavaScript. Does this change the JavaScript game in some way? What do you think?
I think the big change here has been probably TypeScript in the JavaScript world. The reason for that is that a lot of enterprise developers come in, they're used to having types, for example, in C# and Java. Suddenly, TypeScript will give that and a lot of other nice scaffolding functions. So I definitely think, and you can also have a look at the ECMAScript versions, right? You got classes, you got spread operators and a lot of nice functionalities. I don't think all of those changes would have been pushed unless there was a lot of new developers coming in and, you know, saying we want the tooling, we want nice language features and ES5, you know, JavaScript. We weren't that happy about it, right? So I definitely say there's a change because of enterprise developers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is also perhaps a bit of a competition, but competition is good for all of us because it forces companies to do new products, to do new innovations, and so we have more choice, and that is what I'm currently seeing in the JavaScript community.
I'm seeing some big changes. On the server side, obviously Node.js is just showing up pretty often, but the place when I'm not convinced that everybody has heard it yet, but it will be mainstream, is the serverless movement, particularly functions as a service. Now, that's my topic tomorrow, so you could, no, not tomorrow, Thursday. I'm giving too many talks this week. So Thursday, I'm giving a talk about serverless JavaScript. I think for people who haven't tried it yet, it's really approachable, but you can build some amazing scalable stuff. And I think that it's already becoming mainstream, but it will become more and more mainstream. I see that as a really big shift in the way that we create and deploy applications.
I don't know if you're familiar with the recent history of JavaScript and ECMAScript. So it has been stuck for a while, and but as developers really pushed it forward. So we had before ES6, we had things like CoffeeScript that really helped us developing quickly and robustly. Our web pages are JavaScript, and these things really influenced on how JavaScript looks today, I think. Even before TypeScript, if you're not using these tools, you do have ECMAScript, which is really developing very rapidly and giving us so many new features that it becomes really fun to develop with. You can avoid a lot of mistakes, a lot of boilerplates also. So I really think we're moving ahead with that, and this whole world becomes better for developers. So please do grab this opportunity to move forward with the future.
That's interesting, as you mentioned, a CoffeeScript. There used to be also a Dart. So this language, if you take those, CoffeeScript, Dart, TypeScript, do you consider this more being languages preparing to replace ECMAScript for some developers, or is it more like, as you said, pushing the ECMAScript movement forwards, in order to, in the sense of they're providing alternatives, different approaches, which makes in the end the entire language development more rich?
Yeah, well, maybe they were meant to replace them or to be another tool, but that's just how the world works, how things work. When you have something really great to use, something more simple, more intuitive, then the rest of the world kind of lines up with that. So ECMAScript also got a lot of influence from the tools that were provided. And the frameworks, they get a lot of influence from each other. So I think in the end, it doesn't matter what was the original purpose, but in the end, we're just taking the good things from everything that we have around us.
And talking about TypeScript, which is kind of pretty, let's say, mainstream oriented, maybe who in the audience would consider himself being a TypeScript developer? Okay, quite a few. And who would say, no, I'm purely JavaScript? 50-50, right? Huh? More or less. Okay. So from a TypeScript perspective, as we said, it's not like it's not about discussing what is better, but maybe what is TypeScript very good for, and what is, let's say, vanilla JavaScript very good for. Can we discuss a second?
I would say in the cases of TypeScript, obviously it's very good at providing tooling support. I think that's one of the main reasons I think the Angular team went for TypeScript in the first place. It would be very easy to build tools, for example, for the editor code, to make it really easy to make sure that in the cases you have forgotten a type, you're able to amend it later, and you're able to highlight, well, you're doing a mistake here. You're obviously assigning a string to a number. So I would say that TypeScript is not the solution for everything, but definitely it gives you the opportunity to make sure that you have some kind of compile time support, which is pretty important, I think, in JavaScript, because it was very easy in the past to go wrong and not see the error until you actually run the code.
Yes, I think that's the main point. It's about finding bugs more early. It's about finding bugs before the customer does. And a nice thing about TypeScript is you don't need to use TypeScript syntax. You have even an advantage when you just write plain JavaScript, because TypeScript has something that isn't well known in mainstream languages. They have something called type inference, which means that the compiler tries to infer the current type of the current variable or of the return value of a function. And so the compiler will tell you about bugs even when you are just writing plain old JavaScript code. The drawback, of course, of TypeScript is you need a big tooling set. You need a tooling chain, you need to use the compiler, you need to integrate the compiler into your build chain. But on the other side, I would say nowadays, when we are doing big enterprise applications, we need a tool chain or a build chain anyway when it comes to JavaScript.
Any advantages on the pure JavaScript side? From your
I'm into TypeScript. So.
You're also into TypeScript, okay.
You need to know, maybe if you're really wanting to know what's going on under the hood, to maybe have better performance for your application. Maybe you want to know how TypeScript is compiled to JavaScript. But I think that Microsoft is doing a great job, and they're listening to the community with the feature requests and bugs, and they're really getting ahead of themselves with that. Like we already use I forget them. the @ sign, the decorators. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, early in the morning. We have decorators in TypeScript already, which are not yet in the ECMAScript. They're not yet in ECMAScript officially. So I think they do a great job with that, and we should try to use TypeScript. And they also try to give the best compilation to JavaScript as much as they can. So why not?
But speaking about the tool world, and you mentioned the word of enterprise, yeah. So I've heard, and a friend of mine is saying that Angular is the new J2EE of the JavaScript world. Yeah, you mean the Java folks know what I mean, yeah. So J2EE used to be said to be over complex, over engineered, heavy, and too much from everything. Yeah. So is it kind of a repetition of history, or do you think, Manfred, is it bad to say this?
Yeah, I don't like this comparison because I also did
I'm not surprised.
J2E back then. I was young and needed the money. And it was really over-engineered. It was designed by committee. A lot of companies or a lot of companies tried to get their view into the specification. But I understand why people are saying this, because when you are looking at Angular, at first sight, there are much of things in there. And that can be a bit overwhelming. But it turns out that you need all these things when you are doing big enterprise solutions. When you are doing big enterprise solutions, you need something like data binding, you need something like reusable components, you need something like routing, you need something like forms and HTTP access. So at the end of the day, it all makes sense and it all helps you to get easily started with maintainable enterprise applications.
So Chris, you told me you are kind of part an Angular guy and partly a React guy. So what's the difference to React? To be honest, I never got it.
To be completely honest, I don't see that much of a difference.
Okay.
So I would say they're both very component-centric frameworks. I would also say that the user communities are very mature. There are a lot of support on Stack Overflow and so on. There are a lot of libraries for both. I would say, in my head, the main difference is your mindset. I mean, if you compare, for example, React to Java world, I mean, in the Java world, you have a lot of open source, you have a lot of, you can make the options or you can build it yourself. Whereas I think Angular is more like .NET world in the sense that you are being given a complete framework, and of course people think that Angular for that reason is opinionated, and that means, well, Angular team decides on the router, on the forms and so on. But I would say because everything in Angular is being published open source, you can definitely build your own libraries as well, I would say. Sorry, excuse me. So in my head, there are definitely more similarities than there are differences between the two frameworks. So it's really up to you what works for you at the end of the day. I personally don't have that much of a context switch when I move from React to Angular, at least not with Angular 2.
Okay, interesting. Now, Shmuel, I have another question. You are doing a session about progressive web apps. So now we talked about that we are now really working on the web, with the web. And why the hell should we now get native again? Using progressive web apps, or kind of native?
Raise your hand if you don't have a smartphone in your pocket. We all use these small devices, small computers, and they're becoming very, very powerful. So we all want to build applications for them. And the way to do this until recently was to just build natively. And then you have to think if you're building an application for Android or iOS or whatever there is. And there are different features, different ways to do this. But all the smartphones, all of us have a browser installed on them. And web applications can run on any of these devices. And so we can write one application that will run on any smartphone and also on our computers, on our desktop computers. So you write one code. Of course, it's best practice to have some modifications for the mobile version because it's a small screen and there are different features that you can use. It's a touch screen and you have the camera and other things that you can use from the smartphone. So think about these aspects to have a bit of a slightly different version, but the core logic is the same. And the browsers become more and more powerful, and they can access these features of your smartphone. So why not use them? And on the other hand, we also always think about the performance and getting less data, making the application run more quickly and using less internet connection for that and even working offline. So again, that's something that is used both for smartphones. It's really, really important there because of your internet connection and the battery usage. But it's also becoming really important when you're using the computers and Wi-Fi. Sometimes you don't have a connection and you want to work offline. So I think we should embrace all these new features of the browser and work towards that. And the look and feel, we can really make it look native and feel native. Of course, there's a way to go. Nothing is perfect yet. And there are use cases for using native applications. But I think in most cases, we can definitely try doing this as a web application, a progressive web application. Lorna, do you have something to add from your experience?
Yeah, I think so. And I think people think about the progressive web apps as being something for places which don't have a good internet connection. But in reality, all of our big cities have underground systems. I live in the north of England. We have hills. I know which of the applications on my smartphone are going to work as I go through all the tunnels, and which ones are not. And I think technologies like, I noticed there's a PouchDB talk on the schedule, synchronizing to CouchDB. There's lots of things there which give us a real good experience for the user. There are lots of things you can do where we can synchronize back to the server when the network connection is present. We don't just need to refuse immediately. I think this is something which is changing. I'm certainly seeing a lot more activity in this area. So yeah, I agree that this is something which is big.
Alona, as you already mentioned, the server and serverless. So going to the server and then leaving the server again, saying serverless. As you said, you're coming from the PHP world. Now you play around with Node, things like that. What is the point from your perspective? So do you consider Node more being like something like, okay, now every JavaScript developer has a native tool for him or herself to do some back-end stuff? Or is it more like, is Node competing with the other, let's say, traditional back-end technology stacks? Or where's the difference?
Okay, so that's a really interesting one, I think, because for a long time, and this is definitely in the past, JavaScript was about the client side. It was about making your front ends pretty. And it's about much more than that now. It's about a great client-side experience. But, if you write JavaScript on the client, maybe you can write Node on the server, and there are lots of good things that I could say about Node.js. What I'm seeing, which I think is revolutionary, particularly if you're more front-end specialist, is serverless functions as a service. You don't need to write Node particularly. You don't need to know how to set up a VPS or install the dependencies or care about your operating system or patch it. You just write a function, you put it in the cloud, and your beautiful client-side application can start using server-side functionality from those functions. And if you write more than one language, some of those, there's no reason that all of your serverless functions need to be in the same language. So I'm seeing lots of cross-disciplinary teams really starting to take advantage of that. But I think all of the serverless platforms support JavaScript natively. Like all the different platforms support a different subset of languages. They all support JavaScript. Is that a coincidence, or does it reflect the place of JavaScript in particular today? I think it's a really interesting time.
Who in the audience has, let's say, who would say has deeper experience in, let's say, cloud technologies, or especially in serverless function as a service things? Yeah. Oh, I see only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands. Not so much. So the rest go to Lorna's session, right?
Yeah, see you on Thursday.
Okay. Yeah. Last but not least, I'd like just ask a question to every one of you. Maybe you can answer it. Maybe it's the stupid question, but I'd like to hear from all of you. What do you think is the most common, let's say, misconception in the JavaScript world or of the JavaScript world?
For me, this is easy because I see so many different technologies. The biggest mistake is people thinking they have already picked the correct technology and that everybody else is an idiot. I challenge all of you to go and build something, just an RB project, the next thing you're doing at the weekend, in a different tech stack. You might not be converted, you might not adopt that tech stack, but I bet you learn something.
Okay, so I've seen developers who come from the backend world, from Java or even C++, and then they had to learn JavaScript with either framework, maybe Angular.js or Angular or React, and they have this mindset of, well, JavaScript is a mess. You can do anything you want with it, right? So all the good practices that they have from object-oriented programming, for example, if that's their thing, from splitting the code, from having small functions, limiting the size of your code, even code duplications. All these good practices just like go away, and that's just in their minds, because you can really write JavaScript in a nice way, in a more robust way. You can write your code so that other people will understand. You can write clean code. And now you, of course, have more options to do that. That there are like out of the box, like classes and arrow functions and spread operators that really help you do that. And of course, you have all the build tools that take all your files and just build them together to one file, and you don't have to like put a long, very long list in your index.html. So there are really good practices that make you write a very, very clean code. And don't forget it when you yes, you can do a lot of things with JavaScript. You can write however you want, and things will work because the browser just, it takes it, and the browsers are very forgiving. But then you'll also have bugs, and it will be not maintainable. So, so this is what I've seen.
Some more comments from your side?
Yeah, one thing you've already mentioned, there are so much wars in the area of JavaScript, and everyone is thinking he or she is doing the right thing, and the others have just chosen the wrong frameworks because they are idiots or not talented programmers. And I think that's very bad. And on the other side, it's dominating a huge amount of my Twitter timeline, which is sad too. On the other side, I really value a good competition in the sense that we can learn from each other, in the sense that we try to push limits and make the web better. And speaking about misconceptions, I think that we embrace JavaScript nowadays removes a lot of misconceptions, because for a long time we tried to do web programming without the need to understand the web. When you look back at Java server phases or Google Web Toolkit or other approaches, we just tried to undermine the web, to not understand the web, but to write tools for the web, or Flash and Silverlight, as you mentioned today. And I think we all know that this time is over, and we all know that this didn't work out that well. And so it is good that we are at a point where we are embracing the native web and embracing JavaScript and so on.
Cool.
Yeah, so one thing I usually think about is the fact that we have different frameworks that we use, and then we have frameworks that we are inspired by. And I think when we talk about big elephants like Vue, like React, like Angular and so on, we have other frameworks that inspire us, like Elm. For example, how many of you have ever used Elm? Not, okay, one hand. So pretty much my point. So a lot of these really large and famous frameworks are actually looking, the developers of those frameworks are actively looking at, you know, frameworks that inspire them because they're very interesting paradigms. And I think it's important to remember that there's a reason why these frameworks look the way they do. And what I'm trying to say is that maybe you don't want to use Elm or, you know, smaller frameworks like Cycle because the adoption is not that good. But I definitely would say that please have a look at them because they're interesting to study, because they have interesting paradigms that is actually going to come in the next version of your framework, or they might actually be a good fit for you. It really depends. So as for a misconception, I would say that the misconception itself is that you know, React or Angular is first with a certain paradigm, when in reality they might be inspired by Haskell or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thank you very much. I think we could make a little bit clear that this landscape is really broad. Yeah, there are so many different approaches, and maybe it's good to think about the use cases, or maybe your programming culture or whatever, and which approach fits best to you, as you all said. And it's all about inspiration at this conference as well. So go to the sessions which really help you fix problems you got today, and of course look for inspiration. Yeah, that's what conferences are for. Thank you very much, Shmuela, Lorna, Manfred, Chris. Yeah, big applause for them.